And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that break. Hope you're able to get some food, get some water, hydrate your hydras, massage all your marines, as we are getting ready for the second half of this broadcast of ESL Masters Summer 2023 Group D of the open bracket of the open stage. I know there are some people that were asking about Australia versus Cure. That is GSL. That is GSL. It is currently going on over on Africa and over on YouTube. We do plan on covering that series ourselves. We do plan on having some GSL casts, but that will be, I think, starting next week. We do plan to delve into those GSL matches. But for now, we're here in ESL Masters Summer, and we have quite a PvP before us. It's always really exciting to see Drogo. Drogo is a player that used to be a lot more active, used to be a lot more dominant back in the day, back in Heart of the Swarm and the early days of Legacy of the Void as well. Since then, in more recent years, Drogo has kind of stepped a little bit away from the game. He still plays every now and then. I know he dabbled a little bit in Age of Empires. And he isn't as full-time as he used to be, but he is still a powerful player. He's still a terrifying opponent, and definitely has a legacy behind him as well. So I'm looking forward to see how he performs here, especially against Trigger. Trigger, who's more of an up-and-comer in the NA scene, has established himself as a top 3 player in NA, arguably top 2, especially with Neeb retiring, especially with Neeb stepping away this year. I would say that Estrella and Trigger are the top 2 players in North America, with Scarlet as the 3rd, of course. So yeah, Trigger has been able to really skyrocket over the past couple of years. Coming in, I think he debuted in 2020, if I remember correctly. Debuted in 2020. Was it 2021? I think it was 2020. I think 2019 was the... I remember Patty Mac showed up one year, and then it was Trigger the year after. I know they did come one after the other. But yeah, definitely really cool to see him rise up through the ranks, really solidify himself, and now he's here at an international event. He's here in DreamHack Yongshiping, going up against Drogo, a veteran of the scene. Let's go, Poppy. Let's go as we dive into another PvP. Not the last either. We got plenty more. We got plenty more PvPs, Poppy. Aye. Oh. As game 1 is going to be taking place on Ancient Cistern. And spawning in the bottom left-hand corner of Ancient Cistern, we have the Canadian Protoss player. We have representing Team Basilisk. It is Trigger. And spawning in the top right-hand corner of Ancient Cistern, we have as opponent, we have the French Protoss player representing Team Alter. It is PtitDrogo. Let's go, Drogo, of course, coming out of the woodwork. A lot of players did, even a lot of retired players came out for ESL Masters Summer. In the previous weeks past, we were able to cast players like Sort of. We casted Starnan as well. Some very old school retired players coming back here for this game. Of course, Drogo hasn't been retired. Just doesn't play as often as he used to. But regardless, it's yeah, cool to see him here. Cool to see him here competing among some of the other top players. And we'll see how the metas do, or how the metas vary here between Drogo and Trigger. I know Trigger does ladder quite a lot on the European server, to be fair, as both players are going for 2 gate openers. The gateways are thrown down. Probes are heading across the map as we speak. Again, we are on Ancient Cistern because there's no ramp. 2 gate openers are very common on this map. Trigger actually making a beeline for the top left-hand corner of the map instead. More concerned with going for a proxy pylon, less so concerned with going for the scout. So there we go, the pylon is thrown down. A pretty good position for a proxy Stargate. Pretty damn good position, especially with Trigger just staying there in that location, in that position. And what's important is that this is a little bit out of the norm as well. Typically, you'd be proxying here a little bit closer, but this is more likely to be scouted. So Trigger wants to keep his proxy hidden that much longer. There it is, the Stargate is thrown down. Drogo with his probe scout confirms that a pylon is missing, confirms that a pylon is somewhere on the map. Whether Trigger is dedicating to a proxy or not is still yet to be, discovered here by Drogo, as he is now on the hunt for that pylon, for that proxy. Ooh, and looking at his rally, looking at his pathing, he is going to come across the Stargate eventually. Does have quite a ways to go. Meanwhile, Trigger going to be committing to his own scout. Does confirm the 2-gate opener. Does confirm the Stalker Adept opener from his opponent. And as a result, we should be seeing Trigger be a little bit more defensive with these Stalkers as well. His own first Adept is going to try and bypass the army of his opponent. Actually, the Adepts will be coming across each other. Meanwhile, Drogo does find the proxy. Does show to Trigger that he knows as he attacks that pylon as well. And Drogo is going to be getting ready in his own main base. Oh, even going for a Stargate opener of his own. Now, Drogo can make a choice here. He can go for a Phoenix if he wants to try to make sure he's able to shut down that first Oracle. He does have a choice. Meanwhile, an Adept does shade in, but the Stalkers are waiting for it. The Stalkers are being pulled out of position. That will create an opening for this Oracle. But Drogo's aware of that. He does pull back in time. He is here waiting for that Oracle. Meanwhile, Drogo, he could have gone for a Stargate, but no, he's going for an Oracle of his own. So likewise, he wants to go for his own counter damage. But Trigger does spot this with his Oracle. He knows he's getting ready. He does pull his own Stalkers back into his own mineral line. And he should be in position to defend. We see Trigger even going for that Revelation as well. Gets one probe across the map. Oh. And both players will expand. Don't have any crazy one-base solo in that one probe. The hero probe is actually looking to take down that pylon all on his own. Oh, Drogo taking a lot of hits, barely escapes with his life. Not quite getting the damage that he was looking for with that one Oracle. But shout out to this probe. It took a long time, took many years, but hey, killed the pylon all by himself. Let's go. As the pylon does go down. Meanwhile, across the map, the Oracle still having a hard time finding too much damage at all. Drogo committing and going for a second Oracle. Meanwhile, Trigger did not. And this is going to be interesting. So, Drogo now has one-shot potential, but he's actually not going across the map. He's setting up defensively back at home instead. Interesting. Of course, 2 Oracles can one-shot probes. That is the power that they have, and yeah, they are going to be heading across the map as we speak. Trigger stuck here in the top right-hand corner of the map. Twilight Council's on the way for both players, at least just now on the way for Drogo. Blink well in production here for Trigger. There will be a window, there will be a timing where Trigger has Blink over his opponent. As Drogo did not find a way in, just really relying on his Oracles for stasis traps instead. We have a gateway being thrown down across the map. We have 3 gateways back at home. This is a 2-base 4-gate push here from Trigger. He does eclipse the production of his opponents. He has a lot of Stalkers to work with, but he has to avoid these stasis traps. If the stasis traps do connect, then Drogo can take a fight. Oh boy. Can Trigger thread the needle? Does he see? Oh, he doesn't. Oh, he takes a massive stasis to the face. This is going to give Drogo so much time to warp in, so much time to respond. Trigger's going to try to reinforce. Looking at the unit count here, we are even in Stalkers. Oh, as Trigger takes another stasis to the face. That means even though we haven't even Stalker counts. Oh, we do see Trigger. Okay, thankfully he does pull back. I was going to say that Trigger won't have all of his Stalkers available for the fight. But Drogo doesn't dive on this. He does back off. He allows the stasis to run out, and he's just focusing on his own warp-ins. Waiting for his own blink to finish. Just still a bit of a ways off. Yeah, as Trigger has missed his timing, he's now going for a forge. He should be going towards his 3rd base. He was going for the 3rd, but once again, another stasis goes off. Trigger, his expansion is going to be delayed. As we do see Drogo diving on forward here, he's going to be able to take a better fight as well. Trigger trying to hold on, but he is being forced back, and Drogo is going to be able to expand. At the same time, the Oracle dives in. There was not enough back at home to defend. 4 more probes go down. Likewise, Trigger tries to do the same, but no, he will lose his Oracle. And now Trigger is that much more committed. He doesn't have a third base. He's down in workers. He needs to deny this third base somehow, some way. But in a mirror matchup, when we have the same units, when we're down in army supply, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be nigh impossible. This Trigger is forced back once again. Drogo, he's gonna be able to shut down this proxy gateway. And Trigger is forced to back off, forced to expand. A much later third for Trigger. And Trigger's just gonna try and kite his way back home, trying to trade as best he can. Meanwhile, Drogo, he's already long distance mining from his base, from his third. Blink, he's able to catch up with that upgrade as well. Bearing in mind though that Drogo never threw down a forge. He never threw down a forge, so he's going to be perpetually behind in the upgrades. +1 is about to kick in for Trigger. That will help him in his stalker deficit. Oh. As he even this time baits out that stasis. Do love to see it. Trigger +1 does kick in, but he just doesn't have enough stalkers. He doesn't have the numbers he needs. As Drogo is pushing on through, we have the overcharge though. Trigger, can he hold? Up. He's trying to desperately. It looks like he is going to be able to force Drogo back. Has to be careful not to overextend, but he does force back his opponent. He survives. +2 now on the way. Third base getting fully saturated. Trigger is going to be able to hold on. Meanwhile, Drogo is... yeah, he's going to be taking up towards charge lots. He still hasn't gone towards, say, Robotics Bay. He now has a forge. To be fair, there we go. +1 is on the way. I was really concerned if he didn't have one. That I guess he would force himself all in a way, but... he's just a step behind. Instead of upgrades, he's making up for it with his economy. He's already got a 4th on the way. Already long distance mining as well. Drogo may have been forced back, but it still feels like he's in control of this game. He has the map control. He has the momentum. He gets a Warp Prism out. And... he's going to be able to warp in a wave of Zealots. And Zealots, they really change the dynamic here of these Stalker battles so heavily. Zealots, they don't do an amazing amount of damage, but they do a great job at just soaking up Stalker hits and closing the distance and becoming this buffer zone for your army. And they can sway the fight in Drogo's favor, even with Trigger having the upgrade advantage. The Zealots will, in a way, nullify that. Of course, we're still waiting for charge to kick in. Drogo, he goes across the map. He has eyes on the northern 4th base. He just checked the southern 4th, and upon seeing the lack of a 4th, he's like, I don't need to attack. I'm ahead in bases. I can just back off and I can chill. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Trigger gets eyes on the 4th base of his opponent. He's going to try and punish it. He's going to try and do some kind of counter damage. Gets 3 probes. Not too bad. Oh, the main army of Triggers moving on out. Drogo doesn't really have a lot of map vision. He doesn't know, but he's in position nonetheless. A massive blink for Trigger. He loses a big chunk of his army. At the same time, we have a harassing force on the left-hand side. Trigger has eyes on this. He does have an observer following this army. He's able to warp in back at home, but as Trigger pulls back, Drogo is pushing forward, and this 4th isn't going to get up and running. Trigger may catch these Stalkers, which is great and all, but he's forced to cancel that 4th. A lot of the Stalkers are saved. They are recalled back home. Drogo forcing his way into the 3rd base as well. Trigger only fighting with half of his army. Does now reinforce. But again, the damage is done. Trigger still being contained to 3 bases. Drogo, with his better economy, is going to be able to afford more warp pins. Extend his army lead. And once again, he catches Trigger without his entire army at the 3rd base. Oof. The Lomo Stalkers are going to be going down. The shield batteries are trying to do what they can, but there's only so much they can do. We have an overcharge. Drogo is being forced back. But he's catching up those upgrades as well. +2 on the way for Drogo. And he just has to keep containing his opponent. He doesn't have to force his way into the 3rd. He keeps trying to. And I don't blame him. You know, he wants to try to end the game. Not quite able to at every chance, or at every turn. But containing his opponent is all he needs to do, as he takes a 5th base as well. Now, Trigger, unfortunately, he's been stuck in this like perpetual state of warping and stalkers. I do think that it's necessary for Trigger to do something different, whether it's taking towards disruptors or DTs, or disruptors or DTs, you know, one or the other. Something to try to bounce back in this game. Make use of one of the comeback mechanics that Protoss do have. Otherwise, he's just... yeah. Otherwise, how can he come back in this game? I guess he can try to outposition his opponent and maybe try to go for a base trade, but for the time being, he's still stuck at home. Is still stuck at home. Drogo forcing his way in. The natural has opened up to him, and Trigger just cannot stop him. This time, there is no shield battery in position. Trigger stuck outside of his own natural base. He's trying to force his way in. But again, he's even in the Stalker count, to be fair. But the Zealots, they come in from behind. We have a surround being set up as well. Drogo taking a dominant fight. Trigger plummeting in the supply. The base goes down, 18 probes as well. And Drogo knows he can just dive on this army. Trigger was, in a way, I don't know if I want to say stubborn. Like, it was difficult, right? Like, he kept trying to take a 4th base. He was trying desperately to. But staying on this Stalker army just wasn't going to cut it. Not with Drogo, not with his economic advantage. As Drogo's going to be able to chase this all down. And Trigger, he's stuck on 2 bases at this point. Drogo, if he wants to, he could head towards the main. But he dives on the army. Trigger's fighting his heart out, but GG gets cold. And Drogo will take game number 1. Oh, GG. And as he takes game number 1, a massive shout out to Baby Links. Thank you so much for the raid. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you had a great stream. A bit of a shorter stream. I'm surprised. Yo, I'll be honest, I was I was ready to raid you once we wrapped up here. We only have a couple of matches left, but thank you so much. Hope you had a great time. Hope you had a great ladder session. Thank you so much. For those that are tuning in, we are broadcasting the open brackets, the open stage of ESL Masters Summer of DreamHack Yongshipping, and we are in the middle of a PvP between PtitDrogo and Trigger. And we're getting ready for game number 2. Game número 2. Let's go. Earlier we were covering some other players, of course. We were covering Mixu, we were covering Astra, Hero. But alas, it does come down to this series. As a reminder as well, this is an elimination match. Everything is on the line for these 2 players, and spawning in the bottom right-hand corner of Gress Farm, we have the Canadian Protoss player currently down in this series. 1-0, looking to bring it all back. Representing Team Basilisk, it is Trigger. And spawning in the top left-hand corner, we have his opponent. We have the French Protoss player representing Team Alter, the veteran, currently up 1-0 in this best-of-3 series, needs one more, uno mas, to take down its opponent. It is PtitDrogo. boy. Of course, last game, Trigger did open up with a proxy Stargate, and unfortunately, it didn't really do much for itself. I was seeing the chat earlier, and yeah, that one probe on its own, by itself, killed the pylon and depowered that Stargate. Shout out to the hero probe of Drogo. Well done. But yeah, the proxy Stargate didn't really do too much. Drogo was able to take a faster third base after that, shut down the Oracle, do a decent amount of economic damage. If you remember, Trigger was trying to hit a timing. Trigger was trying to hit a 4-gate Blink Stalker timing off of 2 bases, and as soon as he pushed out across the map, he took a stasis to the face. His entire army got stasis, and he missed his timing. Drogo was able to get his own production up and running, and must drop a large enough army to force back Trigger, and Drogo was able to be the first to expand and take that third. A lot of the momentum that Drogo had in that game, I would probably attribute to his oracles, whether it's the harassing damage that they dealt, or also the stasis traps that did connect with the army of Trigger. Again, because of that, Trigger was behind when going into the mid game. And in a mirrored matchup, falling behind is brutal. It's so difficult to recover from that. Just because, again, you have the same tools as your opponent, and yeah, Trigger was on the back foot from that moment. But now he's going to be looking to fight back here in game 2. And already we have some differing openers. A very economic opener here from Trigger, very macro-oriented. He's going for a Stalker Sentry opener. With this, he's going to be heavily reliant on scouting. The Sentry will provide him some hallucinations to send across the map. Meanwhile, across the map, Drogo goes for double Stalker instead, as he does get a kill on that probe. Oh, sorry, Trigger gets a kill on that probe. The reverse. Drogo is going for a more macroeconomic opener. Trigger did a denial on that probe, and it's actually the first to expand as well. Stalkers are moving out, looking for anything amiss, looking for those hallucinations. Alas, Drogo is going to be able to set up back at home, waiting for additional sentries to come out. So there we go, the first hallucination is going to be sent across the map. With this, we're going to be getting an eye on the initial tech, whether it's a Stargate, a Twilight Council, or a Robo. Yeah, there's a lot of power in these initial sentries. Trigger, of course, because of his initial double Stalker opener, is going to be going for a bit of a later scout. And so far, both players are going for kind of the same outlook on this game. They're going for the same end game. Twilight Council openers all around. Both players will be rushing towards Blink Stalkers. I mean, it is the bread and butter of PvP, the Blink Stalker. So nothing too crazy, nothing too wild. No one wants to, you know, rush into some economic damage with like a Stargate opener. No one is hyper defensive with a Robo opener. As Trigger likewise also gets eyes on the Twilight Council of Drogo. He knows, Papi, he knows. But Drogo is able to bypass the hallucinations. He does slip out across the map with some of these adepts, but Trigger, he fans out his units. He does get eyes on the adepts of Drogo. And he should be able to respond as well. Probe is in position here to wall off at the natural. And so far, there's no kind of stark difference between the players. No clear advantage yet. We can see Drogo setting up for a third base. Trigger is going to be moving out. We are even when it comes to the overall production here. This is going to come down to the control. When it comes to the unit count as well, we have an even Stalker count, even the Sentry count. Pretty comparable armies. As Trigger throws down his third base behind this, is going to threaten the third of his opponent, but pushing up this ramp into force fields is, yeah, Trigger's going to be careful. We don't want to push in, Pop. We don't want to push in. Hallucination does confirm the position of Drogo's army. Oh, Trigger doesn't care. Oh my god. Trigger is pushing up the ramp. Oh. Is going to lose a Stalker. Is going to get punished for it. Both players throw down their force fields in a panic, and yeah, Trigger has to back off. He's crazy. He used the hallucination to scout the army. He's like, nah, I got this. As he does reinforce. Still taking a third behind it. We do have a Robo on the way and a Forge for +1. Nothing too crazy. The armies are going to be bypassing each other, actually. Drogo headed for the third of Trigger. Trigger likewise can head into the natural as well. We could end up in a really weird base trade. Obviously we can recall, but Trigger, he turns around. No, okay, he thought about it. Thankfully he doesn't turn around. He is committing as well. Both players are going to be losing their third bases. Uh-oh. Trigger already laying siege upon the natural as well. Probes are falling. Drogo wasting time at the third. Because we're going for a full base trade, he can't waste time. He has to go straight into the natural, into the main. Shield battery is going down. Meanwhile, Trigger, he's already getting into the main base. He's getting on top of the production. Trigger is executing this base trade faster. Yeah, he's already in the main. Drogo still spending a lot of time in the natural instead. As probes are falling. Oh, Trigger, he missed the force field. He did miss the force field. Probes are evacuated for Drogo. Meanwhile, Drogo is diving into the main base. Boys are about to be pulled as well. Pulled to attack. We're recalling back home. Trigger, he wants to fight. Can he take the fight? He throws down some force fields. The boys are here to be pulled, and Drogo is forced back. He loses a big chunk of his stalkers. Looking at the units tab, Drogo is behind in the army. We even have an immortal as well to defend. Yeah, Trigger's going to be able to chase this down with the power of that immortal as well. He has the superior army. Drogo doesn't have much of anything back at home. We're actually even in workers. Both players have 18 probes, but Trigger has that one immortal. He has sentries, he has force fields. Drogo's gonna have to abandon this base. GG gets called, and Trigger fights back, taking game number 2. Oh, let's go, Poppy. Let's go. GG, well played. Trigger just immediately committing to the fight, focusing on depowering the gateways as well of Drogo. Getting into those mineral lines, and Drogo was a little bit more lax, a little bit slower when it comes to even getting into the natural. Remember, he was spending a lot of time at the third base of Trigger, slowly heading towards the natural, and yeah, by the time he was headed towards the main, Trigger, he was already ready to recall back home and defend with his army, with his probes. GG. GG, well played, and we have an ace match. We're going to game number 3. Let's go. We're going the distance. And, yeah, I don't really know what to expect. I mean, what happened in that last game? Well, the armies, they missed each other, and we had to base trade. It's like, okay, fair enough. As here we go, spawning in the top right-hand corner of Altitude. We have the Canadian Protoss player representing Team Basilisk, tying up the series 1-1 in that last game. It is Trigger. And spawning in the bottom left-hand corner, we have his opponent. We have the French Protoss player representing Team Alter. It is PtitDrogo. Here we go. And we already have something very interesting going on. We're loading into Altitude, largest map in the map pool. Has a ramp coming into the natural, so it is very commonplace for players to go for gate expands. Exactly what Drogo's doing. Trigger isn't. Trigger is going for a 2-gate opener instead. Now, we have seen Hero do we saw Hero do this earlier. Hero did this against Astra. It was on Babylon, if I recall correctly. And Hero just goes for you can still go for a bit of a later expansion. You're behind, obviously, like your expansion is still later compared to your opponents, but you can still transition out of this and still be economic. On the other hand, because it's a 2-gate opener, you can also proxy across the map and you can go for an all-in. You have options. Trigger does have options. He can either choose to be behind economically and catch up, or he can just be as aggressive as possible. Probe is across the map. Drogo does confirm the opener, by the way. He does confirm the gateways on top of the ramp. Ooh, Trigger, he takes a lot of hits on that probe. He's going to have to back off. But Drogo is going to be delaying his Nexus here. He throws down a second gateway as well. So Drogo is respecting the opening of Trigger, and he delays his base by throwing down his own second gateway. So he's going to be he's going to be keeping up with the production of Trigger. we'll see who does blink first. So we go Sentry Stalker on the way for Drogo. Meanwhile, Trigger also Sentry Stalker. It looks like Trigger is going to be going for a later expansion. Does look to be the case. I mean, Trigger, of course, has a probe active on the map, but I'm pretty sure he just plans to expand. Drogo is able to, and Trigger shouldn't be too far behind him. Okay. We basically just kind of had a game of chicken there. And I'm sure if Drogo opted not to throw down his second gateway, then Trigger may have committed. Yeah, I'm sure Trigger may have committed to an all-in, but because he saw that Drogo was, again, respecting his opponent and wasn't cutting corners, Trigger's just going for his own base as well. So things are going to be settling down. Of course, you could definitely argue that Drogo is at an advantage with his faster base, with his faster Twilight Council as well, by a couple of seconds. Well, these are, some minute details. And both players are going to be scouting each other. Drogo, of course, needs to make sure that he's not being all-in, and the hallucination will go down, but it does scout the natural. It does see that Trigger is expanding. Now, the problem is that Drogo still hasn't seen the tech. He doesn't know if it's a Stargate opener or a Twilight Council. Ooh, once again, is not going to be denied. Takes a lot of hits, but is able to survive. Just confirming, at least confirming that the natural base wasn't cancelled or anything like that. But another Stalker was in position. Likewise, Trigger's also scouting his opponent, confirming the Twilight Council. Blink on the way. Knows that he doesn't have to be too concerned with an Oracle diving in. And things are going to be settling down. This is very similar to some of the previous games that we've seen. Drogo very quick to expand and take his third. Very quick to go for a more economic lead. And it makes sense on altitude. Altitude is just so large. Counterattacks take so long to move out across the map. We can see Trigger is just more concerned with scouting and maintaining his map presence. Drogo, with these hallucinations, he confirms the lack of third base of Trigger. He's just double checking, and yeah, no third. Drogo knows he has to take a more defensive position here instead. Trigger is moving out. And he's headed towards that third base of Drogo.
Research complete.
We'll see if he can hold on. Looking at the units tab, Trigger does have a slight Stalker advantage. Oh, but Blink is done for Drogo. Say the same for Trigger. Blink is done for both players. Good target firing. Trigger will lose the Stalker. Force fields are running out. Shield battery is done. And Drogo should be able to hold on. Oof, Trigger losing another Stalker. Another three Stalkers. Actually, we can see Drogo with the target firing. He's just shutting this down. Oh my god. You can see here the units lost tab. Trigger loses 5 Stalkers to the 1 of Drogo. The blinks initially were really good, but Drogo was intentionally target firing the weakened Stalkers, and Trigger comes out very worse for wear. Ay, ay, ay. A really rough trade for the Canadian Protoss. And now he's looking for more damage. He's got a later third base on the way. Later upgrades as well. He is going to be able to bypass the army of Drogo. Drogo is out of position. Uh-oh. And Trigger slips in. He dives into the natural base. Probes are going to be going down. Yeah, 4 probes go down and we go for the recall. We could have gotten a little bit more, but for all Trigger knows, PtitDrogo was maybe recalling into his main. So Trigger doesn't risk it. Backs the hell off. Regardless, a good amount of damage was done. Obviously, we know that Trigger could have maybe gotten some more damage there, but again, he does play it safe. At the same time, 2 Adepts shade in, and Trigger had to do so much to kill 4 probes. 2 Adepts do the same for Drogo. He kills 4 probes of Trigger. He makes up for what just happened. He makes up for his losses. as Drogo just expands, takes the 4th base. Oh boy, and once again we do have pure gateway armies from both players. No one is transitioning into, you know, immortal production or disruptors. No one has a Dark Shrine. Trigger looking to hit this 3rd base, but Drogo is in position. No weird base trade this time. We do have 1 immortal out here for Trigger, but once again, 2 adepts slip on in, and they can one-shot probes. They are one-shotting probes. 3 more workers go down. The adepts, they shade into the natural base. Trigger is being pulled apart here by the adept harass of Drogo. 6 probes go down, and he shades into the main. Ay, ay, ay. The damage just doesn't stop. 8 probes. Can we get 9? Can we get 10? No. 9 probes for 2 adepts. Ay, ay, ay. Trigger's getting caught out here as well. This is not his full army. He's down in Stalkers. Drogo's going to be able to take a bit of a better fight. He's going to be forced back. He's going to be forced to warp in as well. And we can see Trigger, he has to be active. He has to make use of his army. Drogo sees everything though. An observer is following him. The Immortal does change things for Trigger. Like, he does have a backbone to his army now. Like, that Immortal can do a lot for him. But pushing up a ramp into a concave is still going to be difficult. This Trigger is reinforcing. We have a random Stalker across the map. Let's go. Prism has been revealed. Drogo knows how committed Trigger is going to be. Here we go. He's trying to force his way up this ramp. But again, he just can't quite pull it off. Drogo is ready for this. He's got shield batteries. He's got an overcharge. He's on hold position. The Prism is exposed and it does go down. No more reinforcements are available. There's nothing to save that Immortal as well. And Drogo, he does pull the trigger. He knows he has the momentum. He does smell blood in the water. Zealots do clash with each other. Trigger trying to reinforce from across the map as well. But the decisiveness here of Drogo, he takes down the Stalkers. He focuses down the Immortal. And Trigger is losing everything. He's losing absolutely everything. And anti-timing here, Drogo, he finishes +2 just in time for the tail end of this fight. From the get-go, this game wasn't going well for Trigger, and things have just snowballed out of control. Back at home, Trigger is trying to muster up a defense, but he doesn't have a shield battery, doesn't have an overcharge. Still needs a little bit more time. And Drogo is not going to give him that time. As he busts on in, the shield battery finishes up, but it gets focused down instantly. And the 4th has been broken. And this spells the end of Trigger. This is an elimination match. GG gets called. Drogo advances on Trigger. This was his elimination in ESL Masters Summer. GG. GG, well played. Well done here by Drogo. I was honestly really impressed. I don't get to cast a lot of Drogo. I don't get to cast him too often, especially because he isn't the most active player anymore. So coming into this tournament, he was a little bit of a dark horse for me. I did kind of favor Trigger. I do think that Trigger is more in form in recent times. He has been really proving himself. For this event, he was actually staying with, if you recall, he was staying in Europe with Rotterdam, as right after this event he went and competed in Home Story Cup as well. He was laddering a lot on the EU ladder, and doing really well for himself. But yeah, Drogo does stand in his way and does take down Trigger. Really impressive stuff here by Drogo. GG, well played. Oh, rerun live, Papi, live, Papi, live. Oh, as he does advance on. Meanwhile, we're going to be covering some other lower bracket matches here. We saw Mixu fall earlier. We saw Mixu overcome the might that is Astra in that wild ZVP, but now Mixu is going to be going up against Creator in the next round. Let's go. Let's go.